Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you guys for joining me today for this virtual training on the Goal Attainment Scale. A couple announcements. Make sure if you haven't signed up for the Related Service Conference, it's going to be Monday, April 27th in Oklahoma City and Tuesday, April 28th in Tulsa. We've had a lot of questions on it, and you'll get 0.5 CEUs or 5 hours per day. And you can come to both days. So the way we're doing it this year is it's going to be like an Oklahoma showcase. So we have local speakers coming from the state, and for every session, we'll have 3 different options for sessions. So if you come to the ones in Oklahoma City, there'll be similar topics in Tulsa, but there'll be 3 sessions. You could just go to a different session, maybe one that you wanted that you didn't get to in Oklahoma City or vice versa. So you can technically go to both days and hear different topics. So I sent an email out about that on the group email. If you did not get that, that means you're not on the list, but you probably are on the list because you have signed up for this training. So, but if you didn't get access to that, let me know. It is free. So we've got some really good speakers coming to talk about anything from feeding to AAC to transporting students to communicating. So there's a lot of good different topics. So that's coming up. I think those are it for the major announcements. So I'm going to go ahead and get started talking about the Goal Attainment Scale. How many of you guys, if you guys have heard of the Goal Attainment Scale, would you click on the yes box? I think you guys have access to that. Or just click yes or no if you have or have not. Some of you have. Good. So it's not completely new. I'd heard of it before, but I took a class in the fall, and I learned more about it, and I kind of got interested in it, and I started kind of just researching it a little bit more. And so I'm going to talk about it today. However, I'm going to try my best because it can be kind of overwhelming. However, I think it can be a really nice strategy for helping us track progress in students or in children. I'm also going to use it in outpatient services. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And could you guys make sure that you're muted? Unless you have a question, and then you can unmute yourself. Okay, so let's see. Today we're just going to talk about the Goal Attainment Scale. It is a criterion reference measure, and it helps us to quantify a degree which personal goals are achieved. So it's a way of us talking about that and showing progress. It was actually developed in 1968 it started in the mental health area. And I didn't know that. Okay, let me see who's still, I'm gonna mute somebody. There we go, okay. It's an individualized way to measure change in performance over time. It allows for documentation of positive changes even when the target goal is not yet achieved. So it can show you those increments towards progress, even if that overall goal is not yet met. It can be more responsive to change than most standardized tests. So I really like it. In the kids I'm using it with are the people I'm using it with are some of those kids that just I'm having difficulty. I'm seeing the progress, but I'm having difficulty talking about it. And it's definitely not going to be reflective in a standardized assessment. Sorry, here we go. Okay, and so It's also assists in writing person-centered goals. So we know, that we really need to make sure that the goals we're writing is student-centered and not discipline-specific. And so it really helps in writing goals that are specific to the needs of that person. It's students where progress, like I said earlier, might be difficult to report. Like I said, I'm using it right now on a 18-year-old girl with a developmental disability, and we're working on showering, and it's difficult to really show the showering progress, but when I use it through this, it's easier to show that progress. And it's also good when multiple people are working towards the same goals. So if you're in a situation where you're supervising maybe an assistant, it's a really nice way to make sure that we're all talking about progress the same way and we're all reporting it the same way. Okay. Some other thoughts before we get into it, the details of it. It does take more time in the beginning to set up. So that's why today might seem kind of overwhelming to get it started. But I've noticed that once I have it set up, it's a lot easy to document on a regular basis. And it's also a lot easier to report progress when you use this type of system. Okay. Sorry, I'm going to make sure everybody's muted there. Okay. Okay, somebody is not muted. Sorry. Okay. So here's a case study that I want to walk you through. This is one that it's kind of a similar case study of a child that I've worked with before, but he's a 10-year-old boy with a diagnosis of autism. He's in the general ed classroom with an assistant. His teacher's frustrated because he screams in class all the time. She said he screams when he needs help and when he just wants to get her attention, to tell her a story. He has high cognitive skills and very verbal. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through the steps for creating a goal attainment scale and what that might look like. So here's the steps to think about. First, you're going to ask yourself, what is the problem? Okay, so what is that problem that's interfering? What is the intervention that you're going to use? What is the goal? How will we measure the goal? How will we scale the goal? And how will we score? And that's what we're going to walk through now. So the first part is identifying the problem. And so thinking about what is interfering with a student's ability to participate in classroom activities. So what is that problem that you're going to address? Is it the social skills? Is it self-help skills? Some kind of communication, behavior? What is the problem that you're going to be addressing? So for this example, I'm just saying Sam yells during class when he needs help and when he wants the teacher's attention. And so that's a problem because his teacher's frustrated, his classmates are frustrated, and he doesn't have a way to communicate except for yelling. And so that's our problem in this situation. Number two, what is the intervention? So what strategies will you put in place to focus on the problem? So are you going to use visual supports? Are you going to use like practice drill, task analysis, social stories? What is that intervention that you're going to be using to address the problem? And then with the intervention for this student, I just put on here, maybe the teacher will put a help card on his desk to remind him to raise his hand and wait to get help from the teacher. The teacher will give him help quickly and gradually have him wait longer. The teacher will practice the strategy with Sam prior to large group. So those are just some things I put that we might use as our interventions. What is the goal? So, sorry, somebody's still not muted. Okay, there we go. Thank you. So what is the goal? The goal, identifying goals. So thinking about goals are different from interventions. So interventions are what the client or the therapist will do. Goals reflect that change in quality of life. So we've got to think about, measurement, quantity, how much, how long, the frequency. These are all things we're thinking about as we're creating this goal attainment scale. And you'll see here in a minute, what I found too with this goal attainment scale is once I go through this, it's a lot easier to create very measurable, targeted goals when I use this scale. And so then measuring his goals, so thinking about how often does he yell in class? Okay, so right now he yells at least 3 times in math and geography almost daily. So he's yelling about 6 times a day. So our goal for him is to raise his hand and wait at least 30 seconds for the teacher to attend to him. Okay, that's what our overall goal is for him. I originally put on here that our goal was for him to yell less than 6 times a day or whatever, but I thought instead of focusing on what I don't want him to do, I'm going to focus on what I want him to do. I want him to raise his hand and wait for at least 30 seconds to attend. Okay, and so scaling the goal. So this is where that goal attainment scale, where it comes into play is, oops, sorry. This is stretching out the goal. Okay, so I'm going to stretch it out from far better to far better than expected to and far worse than expected. So I'm stretching it out. It indicates performance for the goal. And so if you can look down here, you can see that I'm going to look at what is much less than expected and what is much more than expected. Okay, and expected is our 0. So thinking about for this situation, when I write a goal using the goal attainment scale, my 0 is my expected goal. That's where I want him to be, is at the 0. And this will all make sense in just a minute. Okay, so here's how I scaled the goal for him. Is a -2 is I'm going to have him raise his hand and wait for 10 seconds. A -1 is raise his hand and wait for 20 seconds. A 0 is raise his hand and wait for 30 seconds. A 1 is raise his hand and wait for 40 seconds. And a 2 is raise his hand and wait for 50 seconds. Okay, so what this what this is doing is I'm saying this is my scale. So as 0, it means he did what I wanted, or what was he met the goal. Okay, a -2 and a -1 are below what I wanted him to do, or the target goal, and a 1 or 2 are more than expected. Okay, so I set this up. These are how I scale this goal. Okay, and then I'm going to weight the goal. So I'm going to weight the importance of this goal on a scale of 1 to 10. How important is this goal for this team? Okay, and I'm going to multiply that by the rating, and that gives me a score. Okay, and this will all make sense when I put it together here in a minute. Hopefully it will. Okay, so I'm going to create my rubric. Okay, so this is, I put yelling in class, and you can see right here, my -2 is what I talked about, -2, -1. My 0 is raise his hand. A 1 is if he raises his hand and wait for 40 seconds, and a 2 is raises his hand and wait for 50 seconds. So those are above what's expected. This is an 8. This is really important to this team. So the composite score for this would be a -8, okay, depending on how he's doing. So where if I said on 3-1, he raised his hand and waited for 20 seconds, his score on that would be a -1 times an 8, and that's a -8. Okay, and I'll stay with me here and I'll keep going. Okay, so you could also graph this. So I could graph it on here and show, okay, this is where he was on this day. This is, say, the orange is one goal and the blue is the other goal. So on this date right here, he has scored a -8 and then a -16 on the orange goal. And then up here, he's showing progress. He's above a 0. Okay, so I can report progress on that way. Okay, so then from there, so essentially what you do then is you create your rubric. Okay, so you say, this is how we're going to break this goal down. A 0 is what we're aiming for, And then anything a -2 or -1 is below expected, and a 1 or 2 is above what's expected. Okay? And then I take that and I take the weight of that goal, and I get a score. Okay? And so what this does is you can then use that rubric to take your score at every session. So now if I am seeing him and I'm keeping track of today, I would see how long did he wait to rate after he raised his hand. He rated whatever. And all I'd have to do is put a -2 or -1 in it. Okay, so it's an easy way for me to report. The other thing is maybe you're in a supervisory role and you've already created this rubric with your assistant or with your supervisor, and you could then say, okay, when they report, maybe the assistant reported he was a -1 today, then you know exactly what he was doing at a -1 because you have that rubric filled out. Okay, so it breaks it down into really small steps. Then what you can do to report progress, and this is where it gets pretty technical that I've had to really try to wrap my brain around, is the T-scores. So you can turn it into a T-score. And a T-score is a good way of reporting change, like significant change, versus just saying, oh, they scored more points. When you convert it into a T-score, it shows the significance of that change, okay? So a minimal would be 10 points and change, okay? And then you can say if it's anything more than 60, it's much better, okay? And then, you know, anything to, less well than expected would be like a 40 to 49. So let me show you how you do that. And I can send you all this. And like I said, this is, it's very technical, but once you kind of start learning how to do it, it becomes easier. So let me show you this other, I'm going to show you another screen here. And then I'll show you some more examples that might help make more sense too. So here is to create a T-score. It's this fancy Excel sheet that I can send you. But what it does is, like, say if I were to put the goals in here that I'm working on, and raising hand is one that I'm working on, okay? And then maybe getting dressed and riding a bike. I just put some in here. The importance of raising hand is an 8. Getting dressed is a 7. Riding a bike is a 6. So that's what the team ranked as important, okay? Then the baseline would be where they started from. So let's say he started at a -2, where he could only raise his hand and wait for 20 seconds or whatever it was, 10 seconds. And then on the other ones. And then right now he's at a 0. So right now he is at a, you know, where he can raise his hand and wait for 30 seconds. Okay, so then I can look here and it calculates my T-score for me. So it says that he is at a baseline of 22. He achieved 50, right? And then there was a 27-point change. So when he's at a 50 means that was better than expected, okay? Or that, I think that's what, let me look back to here. So it can show you that change in terms of significance. So you might not see a change, like I said earlier, just based on maybe the change in a standardized score. You might not see any change in a standardized score, but you could report change, the significance of change, through these T-scores using your goal attainment scale. Okay, so I'm going to go back to okay. So then if we looked at here, we could see he was at 50, so he's better than expected. So we can say, you know, this is where how we achieved. So some of the tricks for this is you only want to include one problem or variable on each scale. So like when I was doing it on raising hand, I didn't want to say he will raise his hand and he will not scream and put multiple variables. I had to make sure that there was one, we wanted him to raise his hand and wait. Okay. So I was very clear what I was wanting to measure, and I waited for this seconds. I didn't want to put seconds and frequency. I just did seconds. He's going to raise his hand and wait for 30 seconds. If I'm going to add frequency, I would need to make sure that it was the same for everything. Okay, all scales should be equally weighted. So I didn't want to do a -2 was like 10 seconds, a -1 was like 50 seconds. I want to make sure that they're equally weighted. Otherwise, because if it's not an equal increment to go from -2 to -1 to 0, then you don't have reliable t-scores. Avoid variables that are too general or vague. Okay, so you want to make sure they're specific enough that you know exactly what score they're at. Should not overlap each other, so they should be in increments. If you're getting information from another source, that source should be listed. So if I was going to do this in a school, I would want to say that this information is from like teacher report. There should be no expected levels which are so high that there is no possible better than expected. Okay, so you don't want, you want to make sure that expected is achievable, but there's also room to do better than that. Okay, but also no expected goals where there's no room of being less than expected. So you want to make sure that, because we know, there's going to be times when they might do better or times when they might do worse, but we want to make sure that there's room on either way when we're setting up a rubric like this. So here are some other examples before we kind of open it up for some questions. So a student runs away when approached by a peer. Student stays close to the peer but does not use a greeting. Student says hello to a peer. Student says hello to a peer and asks the peer a question. Student says hello to a peer, asks a question, and responds to the question. So what we're wanting here with this one was we were just wanting the students to say hello to a peer. Okay. However, we broke it down, and these would be the much less than expected would be when he runs away when approached, and then much more than expected would be if he said hello, asked a question, and responded to the peer's question. So every increment here, we increased the expectation. Here's one that I did with the girl that I was telling you about earlier, and her goals are showering, shaving, and money management. Okay, so on here, I did showering was the first one. We'll complete all steps of showering using no more than 10 visual cues, 10 physical cues, verbal and visual. That was the -2. The next one would be no more than 5. Okay, and then expected, we'll use only visual and verbal cues. Okay, so I took out the physical cues. Okay, and then somewhat more would be completes using only visual, and then much more would be completes all the steps independently. Okay, so I know right now that what I'm hoping for her is that she'll do it using only visual and verbal cues. Okay, but I know that sometimes she does a little better and sometimes she does worse, and that's how I broke it down so I can report on that. Okay, so if she started off at a -2 at the beginning of the year, and then by December she was a 0, I could report progress through my T-score that she's made significant progress, even though that would never be reflective in the standardized score. So the other one would be shaving. We'll shave arms and legs with 10%, 100%. So here I just leveled the types of how much percentage of help she needed. Okay, but it's equally incremented. So 100 to 75 to 50 to 25 to 0. Okay, and then money management. When given a price of an item, we'll identify the correct amount to pay for the item from 2 choices. And the next one I did from 4 choices, from 6 choices, from 8 choices, and from 10 choices. So I only changed one variable in there. So that way I can level that goal down.
It still doesn't give them any excuse. You should know this all by.
Somebody, I need to mute there. Okay. And then here is one. This was more of a speech one that I found. So produce eye blends with 85% accuracy in structured phases, 17 of 20. And then So they did from structured phases to imitated phrases to structured sentences to spontaneous sentences to conversational level. Okay, so that's how they did that. And then the speech and final word positioning, spontaneous, same kind of imitated to structured to spontaneous to conversational. Okay, and the same with the speech sound production and initial word positioning. Okay. Okay, so hold a second. Let me stop sharing here. Come back to you guys. Okay, so I want your feedback. Like I said, this is like, I'm just going for this and trying it. It's really new to me too. But I found that it does help me break down my goals better to make sure that I am really targeting specific things and one variable versus a lot of different variables in a goal. And also it's made, like I said, it's a lot more work in the beginning to set up the routine matrix. But once I do, it's easier then to say, okay, today she was at a -1, or, you know, in this goal at a -1 and a -2 in this goal, or whatever. And so reporting on it after the fact is a lot easier once you have it all set up. It also gets easier to break down the more you do it. It's just making sure, like I said, that you're only changing one variable in increments. Anyway, what are some of you guys' thoughts on it? Does it seem kind of overwhelming right now? Anybody?
Okay, so this is Jenna.
Hi, Jenna.
Hey, so I think it's great, and I understand how I would use it in my own practice, but if like on the IEP I'm reporting progress, the language is not like, my goal language is not in Goal Attainment Scale language. So that's where it's breaking down for me. So if I'm doing the Goal Attainment Scale and I'm getting -2 to 2, but my goal was written, will respond in however many seconds, I guess that's where I'm breaking down, because it seems like two different data collection languages.
So, so I wonder, like, I mean, could you write your goal not with the numbers in it, right? So you're still writing your goal at like whatever the 0 is, you know, you're not writing it as a 0, but you're writing, like for our example with Sam screaming or whatever, I'm going to write my goal that he will raise his hand and wait for 30 seconds. And I could even add in frequency or however with that. That would be my goal, right? And then I would have this set up, and you could even put on there, like, his baseline is he only waits for 10 seconds or whatever. And so that's going to be your -2. And then you would have your rubric set up around that goal. So you're going to write your goal already like you've done it. Then you set up the rubric. And then at your progress time, you could say, this is where he's at now, and this is the significant of the change that he's made.
Okay.
I don't know. What is that, and be honest. I mean, just tell me, like, does that, I think it helps for some more of those skills that maybe you can't just add a tally or a percentage with, you know?
Right. Which is what I'm trying to go to, more functional. I mean, I'm writing my goals more functional, or trying to, so they are less, they're less bulky and wordy, and I'm measuring these mechanics of my fine motor skill. So that it would help in that. I guess I just need to practice on someone, say, you know what, whenever I'm data collecting, it's going to look a lot different. So that's
And it might even be more so of a tool just for you even, that you use, and then you report on the change over time, and maybe what you could do is take one of your current, a goal you've already have written, and take that goal and write it and put it in a form of a rubric, where you can see, this is the goal. So that's going to be your 0 level. And, maybe the -2 is their baseline, and then what's their -1, and help you just break it down and break it down like that too. But what I found was, when I took my previous goals, I was trying to measure too many variables in a goal. And so this has helped me try to measure one variable in a goal versus a whole lot of different things,
Right.
I'd be interested to see what your thoughts are trying it, for sure.
Jenna and Tara, it's Ty.
Hey, Ty.
Hi.
One thing I was thinking, and I don't know what you guys think about this, but I feel like once the therapist uses their expertise to break down the goal to these levels, then it's more trainable. So there's going to be multiple data collectors, and you guys would know better than I would as far as the school's concerned, but I would think at this point, your skilled expertise has set the variable for the number. So it would almost make teachers across all different environments, PE, music, art, wherever, would be able to follow that rubric and track data. I think there could be multiple people in on data collection, where at this point that's a harder thing to do consistently.
It's much more,
and families also.
It's family centered. It's much more, it's easier to understand, I think, from the outside perspective on what it is that you're looking to measure and how to measure. So I think that is a really, really good point, is that it would make it a lot easier to have multiple people collecting information, because it's very clear what you're looking for. Any other thoughts out there? Gary, any PTs? Beth, I'll call y'all out.
Myself. There we go. Unmuted. I'm here. Yeah, I have heard of this for a long time, goal attainment scaling, and I can see its great application, and I appreciate, Kara, you putting this together for us today. I think the real issue is that upfront work, and I've tried it on a few kiddos, but I think as far as across the board utilization, I've got to get into the habit of seeing each individual child, each individual goal. I think if you had a little library that you put together where you could work off of worksheets or rubrics, you set them up, and then you have that. Am I muted?
No.
No.
Okay, I see. Oh, that's on the next person. I'm sorry. I thought I was talking to myself, which I do a lot. Let me do this so I can see myself.
There you go. Now we see you.
Yeah, sorry. Do you know what I'm saying? I think it's that fear of stepping in and doing something different, and starting with a blank sheet of paper. I think some of the tools that you mentioned and you showed today are great tools. And I've read a few articles on goal attainment scales, and it's kind of like, yeah, if I just set this up, then I can implement it. And I've wanted to. I just haven't done it that much. So I think this is great. Good encouragement to do it. And calling me out actually makes me have to do it now.
Now you have to. It is. And once I did it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so nice to have all this done for this client,
Did you create your Excel sheet, or did you find that somewhere?
I found it. I like Excel, but I did not create that. I found it. So, but I can.
So maybe you could provide a few lists. I mean, I off the top of my head, I can't remember some of the articles, but I probably got them listed in some of my files. But there's quite a few it's really being looked at in the literature a lot. I think goal attainment scaling is really good. I think the comment that was made earlier about IEP goals, I think you just got to look at that center point, that 0 as your goal that we are automatically write. And goal attainment scaling is more of how we can objectify the progress or lack of progress rather than saying, you know, they achieved it or they didn't achieve it. But this lets us know that we've made progress toward it in an objective way. I think that's really one of the benefits to it, don't you?
Yeah, and there's a lot of, you know, literature that supports it, but there's also literature that says it supports it as long as your intervals are equal and that everybody understands it, so they're reporting the same way. So that was kind of the big thing with some of the literature.
Good.
Any speech paths out there? Beth, what are your thoughts? Have you used it before? Oh, you're muted. Let me unmute you. What was that? Okay, say it. Okay, say it again. You're muted. I can't hear you. Oh, I can't hear you. Sorry. Ah. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, any other thoughts or questions? You post it in the chat box. I sent the handout to you guys ahead of time. Hopefully you got that. And if anybody, do you guys all want the Excel sheet that I have too?
Please.
Okay, I'll send that out as well. I figured you guys probably would want that too.
You know, something else, Tara, I was just thinking, I love the thought when you're thinking about your kids that you're consulting on or you're just on monitor in the schools.
Yes.
I love the thought of caseload reduction with this.
Yeah.
Because an OT is involved, but you're really just plan building and educating and supporting the kid from a more macro level.
Yeah, that is a great idea on using this for your consultation and monitoring services. Yeah. What else were you going to say, Ty? Sorry.
Well, just that you could really use your expertise as an OT to set up the plan, and then with education, you know, to the teachers and other people supporting the child, it could be monitored and collected, you know, the data could be collected that way, and you're not on that kid week in and week out.
Yes, that's a great point. Great point. Okay, well, if there's no other thoughts or questions, I think that's it. We will not have a virtual meeting next month because we have our statewide conference. And so if you have any questions on that, let me know. And I will send you guys all the Excel sheet. Okay?
Awesome. Thank you.
Guys, appreciate it.